Hello everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to my guide to Ravana Hard Mode, your first primal encounter in Heavensward. You'll encounter this fight around level 53 through the main story in the Dravanian Forelands. This encounter has several mini-phases, but in total, Ravana has two main phases. If you'd like to skip to the second half of the fight, just use the annotation in the top left of the video. For the entirety of the fight, Ravana's mini-phases can be tracked by watching the Bloodlust meter on your duty list. Whenever it reaches 100, Ravana will gain a stacking damage buff, and perform a variety of different attacks. For Phase 1, Ravana starts in his basic form. In this phase, he has two attacks called the Seething Wing and the Seething Tail. When he uses the Seething Wing, any physical attacks to Ravana's flanks will cause him to counterattack, knocking the attacking player back and dealing damage to them. When he casts the Seething Tail, any attacks to his front or rear will do the same. These moves are further designated by shields popping up on the sides Ravana is currently parrying from, and both abilities last 5 seconds. When he does Seething Tail, tanks should stop using abilities to prevent the boss's positioning from being altered from them being knocked back. This only affects physical damage, so mages, you don't need to worry about it. Bards and machinists, you still do. He also has a hard-hitting conal attack that he will do whenever he is in basic attack form. After getting to 100 Bloodlust the first time, Ravana will transform into Berserk stance, increasing the damage he deals, but also greatly increasing the damage he takes. Saving offensive abilities for this is a wise idea. His first attack in this phase is Prelude to Slaughter, which is a large AoE knockback plus damage. It doesn't have an AoE indicator, so just make sure to get out of its range before the cast is finished. He then jumps into the air and summons several line AoEs to avoid, before marking all but the center of the arena as a safe zone, so get to the center after those line AoEs. He then comes back down and begins channeling Slaughter. This will deal damage and knock back in a 270-degree cone in front of him when it's finished, so just get behind him to avoid it. It has a really long cast time. Immediately after, he will mark two players with a large AoE marker. Try to have these two players spread out to two different quadrants of the arena, marked by the fire AoE Ravana places on the ground at the same time. Keep in mind that if you step over this AoE after it explodes, you'll be afflicted with a 1700 damage dot, so be careful. Honestly, it's okay to be hit by someone's AoE instead of eating the fire dot. You just want to make sure the two AoE targets are spread out. After gaining 100 Bloodlust for the second time, Ravana will enter his ad-killing phase, all primals tend to have. He will no longer take increased damage, but he has access to Seething Tail and Wing again. He can now also use Tapsuya, which is akin to Garuda's Slipstream. The first hit will come out instantly, dealing damage and knocking back the tank slightly, before hits number 2 and 3 come out after a small delay and do the same. Tanks hit by the first Tapsuya strike can simply move away from Ravana's front to avoid taking any more damage from strikes 2 and 3. During this phase, Ravana summons several Spear and Moon Ganas that spam Fire and Blizzard on their targets. Your goal here is to kill the Ganas before they finish casting Fallen Laughter. If you don't, they will summon swords that will empower Ravana's ultimate attack. When Ravana hits 100 Bloodlust for the third time, he will cast Bloody Fuller. For each sword the Ganas manage to summon, Ravana will slash through the party once, dealing damage and increasing the party's damage taken for 2 minutes, which will increase the damage of Bloody Fuller at the end. He will then perform his ultimate attack before entering Phase 2. When Phase 2 starts, Ravana will enter a defensive stance, decreasing all the damage he takes, but removing his ability to auto-attack. His first attack is Pillars of Heaven, which knocks players all the way back to the wall and deals more damage the closer you are to Ravana. So make sure there's a wall to your back from this point on, and move out of the middle to reduce the damage you take. After this, he will mark the target with the second highest threat with Prey. If a tank for some reason isn't second highest on the list before this point, ensure they provoke just to get near to the top of the enmity list before the mark is chosen. Honestly, a DPS can survive it as well, they'll just require significantly more healing. After a short delay, Ravana will spam a half a room-wide conal AoE in the marked player's direction, dealing high damage over and over and over again. Just make sure no one is on that half of the room. Ravana is then going to summon some orbs that will tether and chase 3 party members. If these orbs make contact with any player, or after a short delay, they will explode, deal some damage, and increase that player's damage taken for 2 minutes with the same stacking debuff as Ravana's Bloody Fuller. just kite them away from the people as best as possible. He also shoots a line AoE towards the tank that they need to sidestep during this. Ravana will just repeatedly use that huge conal attack as well as Pillars of Heaven occasionally until his Bloodlust bar fills again. When Ravana fills his Bloodlust bar for the first time in Phase 2, which is the 4th time total in the fight, he will enter Berserk stance and begin channeling Swift Slaughter. During the channel, he will mark 4 different targets with sword marks, with each subsequent mark having an extra sword. This is him marking the order he will attack the targets when Swift Slaughter finishes casting, with the first sword being the first target he goes after, and the 4th one being the last. Have these 4 players spread out away from the party, and party members should ensure to move away from Ravana before he finishes casting the ability. When it finishes, he will charge at the marked players in the order he marked them, dealing damage in a line AoE between him and the wall. Also, anyone he hits will get a vulnerability up stack, just like some of his other previous abilities. Since you'll likely be doing this in the Duty Finder, just ensure everyone is spread out and no one is near Ravana or between him and his targets. If you really want, you can mark designated spots for these targets to go. He will then come back down with the middle of the arena being the only safe place again, like he did in Phase 1. When Ravana comes back down, he will use a large AoE in the center of the room that deals damage and knocks back, so just move out of it. He will then begin charging either Prelude to the Slaughter or Slaughter, so just react to whichever one it is the same way you did in the earlier phase of the fight. He will then jump away and summon the line AoEs you saw earlier in the fight, before finally dealing damage to the entire room other than the middle again. When Ravana's Bloodlust fills for the 5th time, he will enter a neutral stance and begin performing several attacks in quick succession. Tapsuya, Seething Wing, Seething Tail, and his Conal attack are all present, as well as a new room-wide AoE attack. Keep in mind that people likely still have vulnerability up stacks, and if the tank has a lot, it's gonna hurt a lot. Just deal with the damage and dodge his parries and Tapsuya, and it will be an easy phase. At this point, Ravana will repeat his entire second phase over and over again every time he gets 100 Bloodlust, until he either dies or hits enrage. On Ravana Extreme, the enrage was 10 minutes, so I'm assuming it's similar here since I've never hit it in the Duty Finder. Honestly, it seems like a lot of mechanics, but even with tons of mistakes, you can net a win here pretty easily as long as people don't fall off or get killed from repeated mistakes. Anyway guys, thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share for more Heavensward videos, and until the next one, take care.